Like some breaking news now coming in, and in the following the Pahalgam attack, now more developments taking place. The government has revamped a key security board. The National Security Advisory Board has been revamped, and former RAW chief Alok Joshi has been appointed as the chairman. So this is the revamping of a key security board in the wake of the attack in Pahalgam, in which 26 civilians were killed. So these developments taking place on a day that the Prime Minister has also been holding a series of meetings. In fact, not just today, but over the last couple of days, there have been a series of meetings at the Ministry of Home Affairs as well, and clearly concern about the national security and intelligence as well. So now the former RAW chief Alok Joshi will be the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. Ex-army IPS officials have been made board members. So this announcement also taking place on a day that a series of key meetings have been taking place at the Prime Minister's residence. Remember, the CCS took place, and following that, another meeting of the Super Cabinet took place, and after that, it was a meeting, the Prime Minister in a huddle, in a sense, with the External Affairs Minister, Home Minister as well. And let's just go across to Aishwarya now for more. Well, let's go across to Nikunj Garg, in fact, joining us on the phone line for more. Nikunj, tell us more about this, revamping of this National Security Advisory Board.
Well, Gargi, first of all, let me explain to our viewers as to what is the National Security Advisory Board. National Security Advisory Board, like the National Security Council Secretariat, is an independent body that advises the top echelons of power, like the Prime Minister, like the National Security Advisor, like the Home Minister, on various critical aspects of national security. The members of this board, the National Security Advisory Board, are drawn from various intelligence, armed services, armed forces, and the police services. So in this case also you can see that the former RNDW chief, Mr. Alok Joshi, who was also later head of the National Technical Research Organization, that is NTRO, has been appointed by the government in that capacity as the head of the National Security Advisory Board. So National Security Advisory Board and the National Security Council Secretariat are the equivalent of the government policy making and think tank bodies completely under the remit of the Prime Minister's office and out of the remit of any line ministry like Home or Defense. So they are independent of those ministries, so they can retain, attain, accumulate, circulate and pass on any kind of critical views also if they hold about the ministry's functioning, and pass them on directly to the Prime Minister and Prime Minister's office. In the Prime Minister's office, the Cabinet Secretary is the custodian of the information gathered by these bodies. So in that sense, you can say that these are the directional policy-making institutions or bodies and think tanks of the government. Usually think tanks are out of the ambit of the government's functioning, but these are government think tanks like the National Security Advisory Board and the National Security Council Secretariat. So coming at a time when it is coming, National Security Advisory Board, in my memory, if my memory serves me right, saw the last revamp around 3 years back, which was in the second term of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and this is the first revamp of this board, the top National Security Advisory Body, in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's third term. So what we have to see is that for the first time, after taking charge as the Prime Minister of the country for the third time, Mr. Modi is revamping this top body. Now, coming at a time when it is coming, it becomes crucial, not only from any immediate action or reprisal or any kind of action against Pakistan point of view, but in terms of setting the long-term goal of the national security, and finding out any gaps or weaknesses which is very critical at this point in time in our counter-insurgency grid with Pakistan particularly, so as to ensure that as a long-term policy matrix, we don't have any flaw that Pakistan continues to exploit. That's easier said than done because of the track and because of the treacherous terrain that we are in with Pakistan. But the attempt obviously should be towards zero terrorism and zero infiltration to begin with. Governments in the past have been trying to do a lot of work on that, but quite clearly it has fallen short and it needs to be upgraded.
Right, so Nikunj, this board being revamped at a time, coming in the wake of the Pahalgam attack, and when questions were raised about, this meadow where all the tourists were initially at the all-party meeting, the parties were told that the government hadn't realized that it had been opened up for tourists. It was then told that no, but this is always open for tourists. And since then, we've seen at least 40 places in Jammu and Kashmir being closed off to tourists. So clearly, there were some security concerns. So given all this, also the fact that you have a former RAW chief heading this body, what should we read into that?
Well, yes, as I said, that the long-term plan, government has been, particularly since the time Mr. Modi's government has come into power, they are obviously very, very stout on the national security matters. So they have been trying to enforce a zero terrorism plan, which obviously has to begin from a zero infiltration plan as far as our western frontiers are concerned. From the eastern frontiers, there's hardly any ingress, and if there is an ingress, there are ingress of the regulars of the Chinese army. On the other side, with Pakistan, the ingress is always of the informals or the militant or the terrorists trained by Pakistanis. Now, the issue here is that how do you enforce a zero infiltration plan? That's the challenge, and that is the challenge of the large policy making or the apex or the premium policy making bodies like the National Security Advisory Board and the National Security Council Secretariat. Because remember, the line ministries like the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Home Affairs will always continue to maintain that there is hardly any infiltration because their forces are the ones that are guarding those borders. So it becomes almost impossible for them to admit any lapses even in front of the parliamentary standing committees. If the border security force guards the international border and the army guards the line of control, then both those ministries are direct stakeholders in the entire process. Now, it's the duty of the National Security Council Secretariat and the National Security Advisory Board to identify those gaps, fill these gaps, and eventually ensure that those line ministries work in tandem to ensure government's objective, in this case, a completely zero infiltration from Pakistani side.
All right, Nikunj, thanks so much for joining us with those details. So that's the big breaking right now. The government revamping the National Security Advisory Board. This amid tensions with Pakistan over the Pahalgam terror attack, and former intelligence chief Alok Joshi appointed the chairman. But let's return now to those series of meetings that are taking place at the Prime Minister's residence, and let's go across to Aishwarya for more on that. And Aishwarya, since the morning, there's been the CCS meeting, there's been the CCPA meeting as well, and after that, this huddle between the Prime Minister and top ministers. There was to be a media briefing at 3 p.m., but it seems that will now take place at 4 p.m. Give us more details. What can you share with our viewers right now?
Well, certainly the timings of the cabinet briefing had been revised to 4 p.m. Earlier it was scheduled at 3 p.m. But all four meetings took place under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It all started with the Cabinet Committee on Security, followed by the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. Then it was the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, followed by a full-fledged cabinet meeting. After these four meetings, what's important to note is a separate hurdle with Prime Minister amongst the top ministers, which included Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, Home Minister Amit Shah, and Bharatiya Janata Party President and Health Minister J.P. Nadda, who sat together for almost 40 minutes at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. After these all four meetings finished, remember, there was yesterday Prime Minister who was briefed by the CDS, NSA, Defence Minister, and also 3 service chief staffs. One of the such body that holds a lot of significance as far as the national security is concerned. And today the CCS was also chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He was briefed about the latest developments. All eyes would be on that particular briefing, whether there will be some new decisions that can come out by the government of India to isolate, or whether this was a review sort of meeting, because several decisions had already been taken by government of India after the first round of CCS that was chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And after that we saw a series of meetings in the last 1 week with different ministries who were involved and had been given a task to implement those on ground. And it was those separate meetings that were also underway in national capital. We saw how the External Affairs Ministry, the Jal Shakti Ministry and Home Affairs Ministry all were involved in those implementation of those policies. So the brief was also given to the Prime Minister about those developments and whether there were some major decisions that are taken. All eyes would be at that particular meeting that will start at 4 p.m. But important to note is, as I mentioned, a separate meeting after those four crucial meetings that were chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a separate meeting between Prime Minister, Home Minister, Defence Minister, External Affairs Minister and Bharatiya Janata Party President JP Nadda, who were present at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg for 40 minutes almost, and that had set an agenda for Prime Minister's message of giving full task to the Indian Armed Forces to choose their time, place and targets as far as the reaction
Right.
and action against the perpetrators of terrorism.